Thank you.
Welcome back to Book Lovers Corner for our first broadcast since the lockdown, which happened in March. And so it's great to be back here with Gareth. Welcome, Gareth.
Good afternoon.
Because of the lockdown, we were told initially just to have two people on our team, and that's how we organised it, and that's how we remain. So this is a bit experimental for us, and we'll see how it goes.
But we will be getting Steve from Outermost, I understand.
Steve from Outermost will be coming in. We are supported by our wonderful Outermost bookshop in Carterton on our Arrow FM 92.7 station. And we sadly, the last time we were together, had our last experience of sharing with Sue, who is now living up in Waiheke and settled into life up there, and she was going to be replaced by Steve. So Steve is here in spirit. And so here we are for the first time since lockdown, broadcasting on Arrow FM 92.7, supported by Elmos of Carterton. We've got quite a complex sort of combination of books to talk about today, but first of all I would like to give you Sue's notes from a far isle, which she emailed to me, and we said that last time that we would in fact do this, and I'm reading out what she says. I finally received my books from Elmos after a long delay due to the pressure on the courier services during COVID lockdown. This was a welcome delivery, as I had been filling in the void by rereading some of my own books. Readers of the trilogy by Hilary Mantel had been waiting for some years for the third book about Thomas Cromwell, called The Mirror and the Light. And even the extra delay I experienced, I thought the wait was worth it. I can't think of any other series of historical fiction that is so meticulous in its research, so compelling in its narrative, and so satisfying in the way that all the strands are brought together in the end. For those who don't know these books, they tell the story of Thomas Cromwell, who was the minister of everything in the court of Henry VIII. He rose quickly from lowly beginnings, using his intellect and force of will to become Henry's most valuable fix-it man. His fall was just as rapid. I strongly recommend the whole series: Wolf Hall, Bring Up the Bodies, and The Mirror and the Light. And mentioning The Mirror and the Light, talking with Steve before we arrived, he was saying that is walking out the door.
Yeah, he did mention that he ran out of copies. They sold out, and then but then heaps more have arrived. But both of us are reading it at the moment, so I guess in a way we'll have a big discussion on this in the future. And you know, it is also Booker Award time, and the big question is it going to win the trifecta? And,
yes.
We'll put that to the test in the future.
That's going to be very interesting to see whether she'll get the trifecta, having won the Booker for Bring Up the Bodies and Wolf Hall. That would be amazing.
I would say it'll be hard pressed to find a better book. So even though I have only a couple of hundred pages in, but you never know. There's some fabulous writers out there, and who knows what is actually on there. Has made. I guess the long list must be coming out soon. So we'll keep you in front of that as it comes out.
And last year, of course, there was great controversy. For the Booker, with the splitting of Margaret Atwood and Evan Evarista.
Yeah, no, we'll get into that when we look at one of the books.
And going back to Elmos at the moment, the other book that's walking out the door is Alway, and by Becky Manawatu. who is a reporter, a journalist on the Westport News, a newspaper that I grew up with and read as recently as last week when I was down visiting on the coast again. And she was here at Featherston on Sunday. I haven't had any reports as to how that went.
Yeah. Well, I was interested in Steve's comment that it's the fastest selling book in New Zealand, and it's, apart from Catton's Luminaries, it looks set to break records. I mean, terrific. I mean, Ockham book winner, and it's found an audience. You mentioned it's pretty, we'll say once again, this is a book of the future that'll probably come up in next month's discussion. But rather, by the sound of it, a bleak, unrelenting look into the dark soul of New Zealand.
What I've read so far, I'm finding it, I will read half a chapter and put it down, and then I'll come back to it and read the rest of the chapter and then put it down. I'm finding it quite challenging. So I'll be ready to talk about it next month.
Fine, good.
And so let's talk about lockdown. Gareth, how did you manage with lockdown? What did you get up to?
Lockdown, well, I mean, it's the focus on for us, of course, is in this discussion is the books, and I guess a lot of us had what am I going to do with this time? And so if you had your own personal library, you were kind of in a good position. I had terrible timing with my library in that I had a lot of books on reserve and planned to go the next day to get the books, and the library closed on me. And that was it. All these precious books on reserve were sitting waiting
because
for
it was
months and months.
so sudden, wasn't it, that shutdown?
It was, and I needed a helpline desk getting them to open it up, but that never happened. So suddenly I had a few on my desk, which were fine, and but then I found myself going into Kindle a little bit to do it, and also going to my very small bookshelf. I know your bookshelf, Valda. You have plenty of books, and and we got through that. But I mean, I know, for instance, maybe actually I'd like to hear what you found on your bookshelf, and then perhaps comment on overseas what happened.
Well, I spent the first month of lockdown painting the house, which was a great project to have because the weather was superb for that. And I got into a routine of biking in the morning, painting, then having a walk in the evening, and didn't do any reading at all. I had, in fact, got a pile of books out of the library, but when I got into a space to read, I just actually couldn't read them, the ones I'd chosen. And I thought, now, how am I going to deal with this?
I've heard people have the same experience. They had plans, but lockdown changed the plan.
And a number of the podcasts I was reading, I wasn't alone either. A lot of people found that the books that they perhaps normally read, keeping up to date with the latest book here and there, just didn't work anymore. And so I thought, what do I do? So I went to my bookshelves, and what I thought, I need comfort reading. Now, what was comfort reading for me?
Cookbooks?
No, I know a few others where cookbooks would be comfort reading, but not me. I went to sort of natural history, living life out in the country sort of books. And the first one I went to was A Country Year by Suhu Bell. And I read it when it first came out, which was 1999. So that was 20 years ago. And you never quite know when you reread books whether you're going to get the same degree of comfort and passion and that from it. I read A Country Year and loved it yet again 20 years on, which I think is a sign of excellent writing. Now, Suhu Bell was a woman who had been married. She and her husband had bought this acreage of land in the Ozarks in the States.
It's a TV show, isn't there? It's set in the Ozarks.
Ah,
so that's
don't know.
Yeah, because it's a lake. It's full of lakes.
Yes, it's and rivers and that, I think. And her husband sort of went off and left her alone on this property with this land. And she was a beekeeper. And so the book is called A Country Year, and it goes through from, I think, spring through to summer, through to autumn, winter, back to spring again, and just traces living in that particular neck of the woods, quite literally, for a year and a bit.
So it has shades of Walden.
Very much shades of Walden, but I think in some respects it's very interesting. And I'll refer back to this later when I talk about another book of the comfort variety, written by a woman, and it brings a different perspective somehow. But
still a book touching on philosophy.
Absolutely. So, you know, one of the comments is steadily eloquent, not just her life, but of all life. So it's that philosophy. Then another one, a calm, clear-eyed record of a country year and its beauties.
And it works for a New Zealand reader. It's not an American book.
This one doesn't give me that sense. It gives me the sense of a woman living on her own in the countryside, having a passion, in her case, not only the countryside, but her bees.
Right.
And she sells her honey in New York, top dollar in New York, and in Dallas, and toodles off in she describes her vehicles that she moves around, and one she uses for on the farm and one she uses for going and selling her honey. And so she's got that passion, and I felt very, very much, I didn't feel it was the United States. I felt she was living in the countryside.
So it's travelled well.
So it has travelled well in time and in geographic distance. So that was the first one I read. I then went to another one, which was Annie Dillard's Pilgrim at Tinker Creek. And it was the 1975 Pulitzer Prize winning book for nature writing.
I remember going back. This book had a tremendous reception around the world and was very popular, I understand, in New Zealand, and resonated with readers. And I think from that she drove out a book on future books on how to write.
She did. I've got one of her books, which I should have brought with me. I didn't. The Writing Life, it's called.
Yeah.
And another one she did, which is also another natural history one, living in the natural world, and that was Teaching a Stone to Talk. And that my copy has disappeared over the years. Goodness knows where it's ended up.
You gave it to a good person, I'm sure. Not me, but you gave it to someone, yeah.
So, but interestingly, I started reading that, and whereas Sue Hubell's A Country Year got me straight into it and into it yet again, I didn't feel the same connection with Annie Dillard's Pilgrim at Tinker Creek, and I couldn't work out what the difference was.
Is it you've changed, or do you think Dillard just didn't have the legs to... Is it full of cultural reference of the time? Has it got a bit dated, or is it...
I think it might be a bit dated, but what I liked about it at the time was she connected the science into it.
Right.
Which wasn't so obvious in Hubell's book. And yet, the science in me hasn't gone, but I just didn't connect with it in the same way
But this is kind of like us listening to the music, perhaps, of a time when we were a different person, or movies that we suddenly rewatch and wonder why we were so entranced with it, when it first came out. But now later we see it as a perhaps rather something else, something lesser.
And it's so true about the music, because one of the things I did over lockdown, because I was really tired every night after painting all day and so on, I would put on an LP on my stereo and listen to, and I went through all my LPs. Well, I went through
this is old tech. Well done.
Very old tech. And it was really, really fascinating. And so I'd write down the LP that I had listened to, and I'd go finger down, thumb up, or really star, yes.
Got a couple of stars that you could share with us? Or?
I loved Steel I Span.
Okay. So there you go.
Sails of Silver.
There. Oh.
And I just thought, and so I was back then, and it was just wonderful.
The blast from the past.
Yep. And good old Central Park with...
put you on the spot here. I know that...
how ridiculous. Simon and Garfunkel.
Oh, okay.
Whom I went and saw at Athletic Park in Wellington. And so Central Park was fantastic. So there were some, and then others I thought, why did I get that one? Because I belonged to the World Record Club at the time, and you'd get one a month. And
hey, that was the gift of lockdown. You had a bit of space to...
It was wonderful.
Did you dispose of them, or have you just put them aside?
Oh, no, I just put them aside. I'm not going to dispose of them. Not yet.
Okay. There you go. They could become somebody else's treasure.
Yeah.
But anyway, back to the book. Didn't quite have the legs. Didn't
have any legs, but there were two others that did have legs. One was a book that I listened, as you listeners will know, I listen to podcasts regularly, every night before I go to sleep, actually. And I love Scotland Outdoors, BBC Radio 4, Scotland Outdoors. And they recommended Nan Shepherd's The Living Mountain, about the Cairngorms. Now, it's a very small book. It's only 100 pages. I got it, went into the library when it first opened up, and got it out immediately.
Stack room.
I'm not sure. It hadn't been used.
It would have to be a stack room.
Yes,
it's so old.
It hadn't been used for... Nobody had taken it out since 2010, I think. I don't know why it hadn't gone on the Remainders sort of trolley. I read it and was absolutely captivated by it. Absolutely captivated. Now, so the Annie Dillard and Suhu Bells were relatively recent, within the last couple of decades, whereas Nan Shepherd's book was written at the end of the Second World War. And there are hints of that within the writing. And she's written about her life as it involves the Cairngorms, which are the mountain ranges, the highest granite plateau in Europe, which is riven by, deep fissures from rivers, and there's lakes, and it's got very wild weather. I think they have a lot of deaths on the Cairngorms because the weather comes down quickly. And
you weren't a geologist in your past life, were you? I mean, it's... you do like this...
Oh, yes, I do.
This geography context to...
Yeah, well, it's about the planet, isn't it? It's about the world. It's about what makes things... What was even better about the book when I finally got it out, I'll tell more about Nan Shepherd shortly, was that the foreword, the introduction, was written by Robert Macfarlane, whom you may recall was the author of Underland, which was my absolutely most favourite book of last year.
I knew you were going to weave that in somewhere, so there it is, yeah.
It was, and he writes, and he wrote in this so captivatingly, absolutely pulls you in. And I thought, Nan Shepherd can't write it won't be anything up to Robert Macfarlane's standards. However, it was. So excellent writing. And in fact, she was a woman who was lectured at Aberdeen University and was a writer, a poet. She wrote 3 novels. Then she wrote this book, and it lay as an unpublished manuscript till 1977 when the University of Aberdeen published it. So 40 years it just lay there. What a waste.
Well, it was waiting for its time.
It was, and yes, it did come in its time. And she hasn't organised it as some of the others that I've been talking about. She organised it on different sort of themes, like the plateau, the recesses, which are deep in the plateau, the water, frost and snow, air and light, plants, birds, animals and insects, man, sleep, the senses, being. It was gorgeous, short, profound.
And not academic. Well, this is written for...
Not academic at all, even though she has an academic background.
But you sense the rigour behind it, but the writing was
absolutely
for us all.
Yeah. I recommend it heartily. One other book which I'll go on to later because I'll give you a chance to have a say, Gareth.
I'm enjoying this. Keep going.
One of the other books I looked at was The Outermost House by Henry Beston, which is American yet again. But somebody made a comment about his writing, and it says he gives us, or she gives us, through language we would love to possess, a world we would love to live in, and a way we would love to live. And I think in lockdown, that's what I don't have the facility of language to write like these people write.
Who has? I mean,
they're out, you know.
They're in that top percent.
Yeah.
You know.
And they talk about a world that I do love living in. And so, you know, in lockdown, I was biking out in the countryside every day, walking in the countryside every day. And you were looking at birds, flowers, everything. And so I would come home and think, oh, now what is the collective noun for a group of pukekos?
Being?
A potter of pukekos. Of course, they potter around the paddocks.
It just shows what you learn a lot on Book Lovers Corner, yeah.
And what is the collective noun for a group of goldfinches? Because there were goldfinches everywhere I biked, and there were goldfinches. I was surrounded by goldfinches all my trips. Well, it's a charm of goldfinches. So I was constantly being charmed by charms of goldfinches.
So this is the gift of this book, or these books, is that a heightened sensitivity. So you're suddenly it brings an awareness, yep. And so you're seeing better, hearing better.
Yep, absolutely.
And
it also recalls back instances of your own experience. So, for example, Nan Shepherd was talking about when she, in her chapter on air and light, for some reason feldspar came in there because feldspar was red, and it makes a lot of the colour in the cairngorms reddish because of the feldspar. And it just took me back to walking the Heaphy track once, and one of the couple of times I've walked there, coming down the coastline from the Heaphy hut down to Kohaihai at the end, and going past, and there had been a river of rock. There must have been a landslide of some sort, and this river of rock came down, and it was just what is called Karamir granite, which has got feldspar in it. And so reading that, it took me immediately back to this walking the Heaphy track and seeing this river of feldspar on that route.
What about great walks? My memory of, one of the big memories of the Heaphy is walking out through the Nikau and hearing, and not being able to talk because of the sound of the roar of the surf. Absolutely.
Yep.
One of the great New Zealand places. Anyway, sorry. Continue.
Yes, I was up there in February, so I can affirm that it's still there. And so Nan Shepherd's The Living Mountain was written over about her many visits to the Cairngorms over a period of time, just as Suhu A Country Year was written over a period of time of her living in the Ozarks. Whereas the other book I was going to talk about, The Outermost House by Henry Beston, it's American. He was an academic, but he had a very interesting sort of life. He was an academic, although he had been... he taught at the University of Lyon and went to Harvard, but then he, in fact, enrolled or whatever in the French Army in 1915 as an ambulance driver. And he wrote a book based on that. It was his first book, A Volunteer.
Hemingway, an ambulance driver?
I'm not sure. He was something, wasn't he?
Sorry, go on.
And... then he was a press representative for the US Army, and he was involved with the British Navy, and out of that came a book called Full Steam Ahead. He then got into fairy tales, and he married and had two daughters. But he, I think, had suffered probably PTSD, which wasn't recognised then, and he retreated to Cape Cod in 1925, where he took a year out of life and wrote The Outermost House, and it's become a book in the United States that is held up as sort of the beginning of the environmental movement. And in fact, Rachel Carson, whom we know from Silent Spring and so on, it was his book that in fact influenced her most in her writing of Silent Spring. It became the house that, which was on the sand dunes there. Of course, he revisited it later in life, but and it became and final visit was in 1964 when it became a National Library landmark.
So this is
this
in the heart of Cape Cod.
Yeah, it's in the middle of nowhere, on Cape Cod, right at the end.
Because we're all familiar with sort of Cape Cod decor and architectural features of beach houses. But just looking at it there, it doesn't seem a grand house.
No, it was just built locally, just for him to.
So it's our batch.
Yeah.
It's not a.
No, it's our batch.
So New Zealand readers would
absolutely
connect with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But the house was eventually carried away by high tides and a hurricane. But what he talks about, he was only there for a year, which is so different from the other books that I've talked about. And he again went through the year.
These are almost like almanacs, aren't they, that guide you through the changing days.
And because his was based on the sea, and it's just, he talked about the lighthouse keepers and how they would patrol up and down the beach in the middle of the night, and the shipwrecks, but he'd talk about things like seaweed and birds and fish and so on. So those books I recommend, and we'll give you a list of them again at the end. and I think that's probably time for us to play the music interlude for today, and that is a music from Kaja, which is a Nelson company, and the music is Dulaman. I'm not sure if I've pronounced it correctly, but it's seaweed, which is very appropriate to what we've been having.
That's good.
Welcome back to Book Lovers Corner, Arrow FM 92.7 with myself, Valda Kirkwood, and Gareth Rapson. And I've been flowing forth about my comfort reading during lockdown and subsequently. And Gareth, over to you now.
Right, let's have we said before at the start of the top of the show that we'd look at perhaps what had happened with audio books, which was I think suddenly people realised that this was a time when you could engage with audiobooks. And what happened in London and with the BBC, they began with a reading of Albert Camus' book *The Plague*, which is a story of a small Algerian town that gets isolated by a pandemic, and they sit around thinking what's happening and what's raging around them outside. It becomes under this nice label of quarantainment. There's a nice word for us, what we do under quarantine. But then the BBC decided that they would, for some comfort reading, just go for the... they would dramatise all of John le Carré's George Smiley books.
Oh, really?
And so they entertained everyone. And nowadays, the kind of Cold War represents a rather simpler time. But in the popular imagination, Smiley was a sort of owlish wanderer. And apparently the reading numbers went off, or the listening numbers went off the charts. They used celebrity readers. Margaret Atwood's book, The Handmaid's Tale, was read by Claire Danes. Meryl Streep did Nora Ephron's Heartburn, and the great Sir Ian McClellan read The Odyssey to the listeners. So this was a time when they went back to some older books, and we didn't kind of match it. I mean, what we got in New Zealand was doing yoga and exercise at 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock in the morning sort of was, the entertainment that was dished up to us. No, that's a bit harsh. There were other things. But while we, in the first half, looked at non-fiction, I'm very much going to look at fiction that caught my eye over this time. And the first one was last year's Booker Prize winner, co-winner with Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo. Remember, this is a strange time last year where England couldn't make up its mind. It couldn't make up its mind about Brexit. When the Turner Prize came up, they had 4 finalists, and in the end they gave it all to all 4. And when the Booker Prize came, they gave it to 2 women. And
that's still resonating, because I was listening to something this week. People were talking about that.
They were saying, like, England, make a decision, do something. Anyway, this book, which really it was covered in my book club that I go to on Sunday. We had a look at it, and most of it we kind of agreed that a book about 12 English black lesbian woman was not going to be the kind of book that we would pick up or expect anyone really, apart from a rather niche audience that might be taken by it. But somehow this book broke out and got a worldwide reception. It's very, very contemporary, and it's about these a range of women of different ages, abilities, backgrounds, histories, work, all that sort of thing. And it's told in parts of, like 5 parts of 3 women, and then the next 3, but they're all actually linked, and it's all coming together in a grand, they're all going to attend and be all together in the final chapter kind of epilogue. So there's a beautiful structure to the book. The storyline is terrific. It is engaging, and it's written in a way, stream of consciousness, punctuation just disappears, and it becomes a incredibly quick read, where you may have been challenged by James Joyce's Ulysses or Virginia Woolf to the Lighthouse, and those sort of books which read a little bit like that, but this reads like a dream. It absolutely just takes you in. Incredibly empathetic take on these women who are all coping. This is not a book about despair or anything. These women those bad things may have happened to them, or good things, or whatever, but they're all making it. They're all getting there.
And I was listening to an interview with her the other night, on a podcast, and she was explaining how it originated, and that wasn't what ended up being the book with 12 different ones. It wasn't, in fact, what she intended at the beginning. But she started off with one, and then her mother came into it. Then the mother's sister came into it, and then her daughter, and then the grandmother, and then they're all interconnected in a way. Did that come through in the reading?
Not well. It does at the end, but you work your way to it. It is very cleverly done.
Yeah.
This is a positive book. This is a book about being black. That is a topic that's swirling around us now, and swirling around the world actually. And it's fiction at its really best. And it's in our group. In the end, we asked to put our hands up who would have given it the Booker Award if we were all sitting being the judging panel of the 8 of us, and 2 of us would. I was one of them, and 6 of them wouldn't. And that's the perfect sort of book club book where everybody's kind of got a different angle, because the book was long. It could have been. Some felt it could have been tightened up. Some felt it was kind of like a series of articles cobbled together. They got some things, but in the end, I thought it was its total compassion. It was heartfelt. There are, any book that absolutely gets you and you have very strong emotional responses to it is powerful. And, I really recommend that to you. Second book, once again, a book that's, in fact, was called American Dirt by Janine Cummings.
This is the one where there's quite some controversy about, isn't there? Because she is a white woman talking about a non-white situation. Is that
exactly? Yeah. It's about cultural approbation, where but let's put that to one side and just get to the story. This book is the story of Lydia Perez. And I hadn't read the reviewing of it because, in fact, a lot of reviewers have said, I refuse to review this book. So it's that strongly held that there's an opinion out there. And it's a tale of Lydia is a middle-class Mexican wife of with one child, Luca, and a husband who's an investigative journalist, and they live in Acapulco in Mexico. And our vision of Mexico, as New Zealanders, is often we are on the border. We get border stories. We get cartel literature. We get murder. This is the murder center of the world at times, and it's kind of like a country that's incredibly in turmoil for a lot of different reasons. And that's the news portrayal of it. But here we have Lydia running her little bookshop in Acapulco, and we're engaged with this smart, savvy young woman, and suddenly circumstances absolutely collapse. One of her favourite book buyers turns out to be a drug lord, head of a cartel, but they have actually bonded over books and have become good friends. Both are married. This is not a romantic relationship. This is a meeting of minds, and they really, really are great friends.
That would be devastating.
Oh, yes. And without too many spoilers in here, but suddenly all is changed, and Lydia and her son are on the run. And they are now going to enter living their middle-class life in this very attractive tourist city. They're now going to be on the run, pursued by the cartels, and they're now suddenly plunged into the migrant story. And then that's the big Mexican story, is the caravans of migrants coming up from the various South American countries looking to cross into the border and get into America. And they're in the thick of that. Now, we see those migrant stories, but this book is right in the heart of it.
Takes you into it. Yep.
As a read, it is incredibly page-turning excitement. I mean, it's got the it was the book of the month from the opera book, the Oprah thing there. The sticker of doom called by the reviewers, but we'll get into that in a second. But anyway, it's riveting. It's absolutely, you are living on the edge with this woman and her son, and it is dangerous, and it is...
Because that's often what we don't see. We hear all these stories, but we are never get the opportunity to be within the story.
Right. And it is fiction.
Yeah.
It's made up. And let's now jump into the controversy. The controversy is people are saying, what is this white American writing about the story of migrants? And those migrant voices can't get out. They've got the real stories, but no one's going to publish, and how are we ever going to hear them? And so they just leapt onto this. This was PC at its worst, and it created a worldwide debate. The sticker of doom, suddenly it was being read by everybody, and people, and the writing is, it's kind of, it's good, but it's not. It's nothing like the books that you've talked about in the first half. This is a novel that is a thriller, and it's, I think, really good. But the authentic voices are being ignored. So you enter the book and you're going to say, am I going to read this for a terrific read? I mean, people have said this is kind of a Grapes of Wrath of our time.
Yeah.
And a lot of top rock, Don Winslow, who writes about the Cattell sort of gang stuff a lot, and John Grisham gave it all the ticks. It was given was pumped up. But, man, has it got the world excited about all sorts of other things.
Well, if it can have the power of Grapes of Wrath, I mean, I still can remember reading about the Grapes of Wrath one August holidays, tucked up in our family batch with the rain hosing down outside, and it was as grim as grim as grim, and it was embedded in me then.
It was the Joad family, wasn't it? Joad. It was their story of leaving Oklahoma and coming to California.
And the Dust Bowl, and
I still see, for some reason, I read the book and liked it, but I still see Henry Fonda in the movie.
I never saw the movie.
It was one of his great roles. Absolutely stunning adaptation.
And so if a book can do that and give you an insight into the sort of life that other people are leading, then it's got to help you get some empathy for those people who are in that situation.
I totally agree, and that's where I think it's a good book for New Zealand readers, in that you suddenly understand what it's like to board a moving train, and you're doing it every day, and the trains are moving fast, and there are a lot of accidents, and you're suddenly into trying to cross the border.
And you've got a child.
Right, who happens to be he's really good at geography, so he's very helpful at times, and a terrifically engaging thing. But as they're told right from the beginning, you will be robbed of everything you've got. You will be ransomed, captured, likely raped. That it is going to be a harrowing experience, and she has no choices. The Cattells have got her on their phones. They're at every checkpoint. They're at every train station. They are inescapable. And it's the excitement of weaving your way through it. What a read! It's just, and I think it's worth putting aside the controversy. Read it and make up your mind. Did they get it right, or did she get it? Is it right what she did? I totally come down on the side that it's a good read.
Well, if it enables those of us who don't have that experience to have some sort of idea about what's happening, how else are you going to get it? Because people who are in that situation aren't going to be in the space or whatever, not going to be able to write about it.
I know, and then becoming an undocumented kind of citizen in America, in Trumpian America, is and where that rolls out. But once again, it's well worth getting, and it's American Dirt. There you go. How are we going?
We've got 10 minutes left, Gareth.
All right, let's pick up another book. Let's go completely different, but also I would, really totally endorse this one. And it's got a strange title. It's called 10 Minutes, 38 Seconds in the Strange World, and by Elif Shafak.
Oh, she's the Turkish writer, isn't she?
She is the Turkish writer, and this is a very European book that had a huge audience in Europe, especially in Turkey, but it got picked up and shortlisted on the Booker, which tends to be, the way. Once you get that, suddenly the world has got your attention, and found it in the Martinborough Library. It was on the catalogue, and somebody pointed it at me. Wow, what a book!
Well, that's great, because I've had her down as an author I want to read. So she's really written. Interested to hear about this.
Hugely, like Everesto, an absolute person of substance. Has done many things. Rates and top 20 most influential woman in the world type of things, and you find I've never heard of this person, so suddenly you get a book by them, and it's good. And it comes from a bit of research that was done that says when we die, our brains still will tick over on average for about 10 minutes 38 seconds, even though you are dead, with sensations and things, though you may not be conscious of the memories, these things will be happening. And this is where our story begins, that our tequila Layla, the protagonist of the story. I mean, there are two protagonists. One is Istanbul, the city, and Layla's story. Layla is dead, and she's in a dumpster, and she is. And so, but her mind is, minute by minute, is happening. And what we're going to do is we're going to learn her story unraveled. So our character is, she's alive, but she's dead. You get your head around that. And we're going to, it is actually a wonderful commentary on friendship. And it's about these key people who have become her friends or pivotal in a positive way in her life. And it is, each minute is bringing us a memory and a key moment. And also these friends are desperately trying to find her. The book is in two parts, that and then in part two, which we'll get to in a moment. But it's set against some of the key moments in Turkish history, and it's if you're familiar with Istanbul, it helps, but it doesn't. You can still, imagine. You could actually. Interesting enough, it's a place like 2 years ago. I was in Istanbul 4 times in 1 year. So and actually where the book is set is a very popular Taksim Square down to past the Galata Tower, down to the bridge, but as you cross over into Topaki, that side of the city, that's where she is now.
And that's what I like about some of these books, is that you go to your maps. Right. So I would have gone to my map of Istanbul, and these ones I went to my map of the Cairngorms, and I went to my map of various places. So this going to your maps is really, I find, really exciting about some of these books.
Yeah, so, and this is a modern Turkish story. And Erdogan's Istanbul as the changing rise of Muslim nationalism and all that is all tucked away there. But the book is charming. It's full of wisdom. It's beautiful. It's compassionate. It is her books are often about strong female characters.
Have you read any others of hers?
No, and not that they're easily available.
No.
This book has got out, whereas
because of the
but apparently in Europe they are tremendously, and they're translated into many languages. Love letter to friendship, and pretty harrowing. It's not. This is, but it's a book that I in a way it reads like almost it's a combination of just the arc of a young woman's life, and there's a lot of. And it's not going to be neatly tied up like some police procedural. And even though you can hint that behind it, the police are involved in this. There have been this series of killings of young sex workers, and so they're into it. But totally give it a if you're looking for that exotic read, that's the book. 10 minutes, 38 seconds in this strange world.
Well, I think that sounds 3 books that I want to read. Thank you, Gareth.
There we go. Yes.
And I think it's probably time for us to sort of summarise up the books that we have been looking at today. The last one I mentioned was The Outermost House by Henry Beston. A Year of Life on the Great Beach at Cape Cod. I mentioned Annie Dillard, Pilgrim at Tinker Creek. Interestingly, her introduction was by Richard Adams, whom you may recall back in the day. Suhu Bell's A Country Year, and The Living Mountain by Nan Shepherd, whom bizarrely it hadn't been got out of the library since 2010 or something like that, and I haven't been able to get it out again because somebody else has got it.
It's in the wind.
Who would know? It's in the wind, obviously.
But Richard Adams, was he the Watership Down?
Watership Down.
Right. Okay. Yep.
And I think that was on TV during lockdown. And so your books were, please, Gareth?
My books are 3 fiction books. We were in London. We're in England, in London, with Girl, Woman, Others, looking at a tremendous story of black women's lives. American Dirt, we suddenly were in Mexico on the run from the cartels, looking to cross the border. And 10 minutes, 38 seconds in a strange world, we suddenly were in modern Turkey, in a very, very interesting situation that will just draw you in from the opening page. Next time we meet, we're looking at probably books like Deep State by Chris Hawley, which is a political thriller. Miss Austen, we'll get into the world of Jane Austen. A very modern, contemporary book called The Man Who Saw Everything by Deborah Levy.
And Becky Manawatu's Aoway.
And Aoway, yes. Lots of new books coming up. And, of course, it is, after lockdown now, suddenly the publishers, everything is springing back to life.
Yep. And that's us for this month, Book Lovers Corner on Arrow FM 92.7, supported by Elmo's in Carterton. Goodbye.
Homie, can't you tell? Build a house with your brick shot.